Hello guys and welcome to my new video. The first DLC is in the books. Blurple took the win at DLC Bologna, but what does it mean for the rest of the fabled season and the upcoming set championships? Which decks should you play right now? Let's find out. Have fun, let's go. So this list took first place at DLC Bologna, Blurple. Before we go over some card choices in detail, I wanna talk about some numbers. Almost 700 players among 2,000 players in Bologna played Blurple, so the chance of playing a mirror game is pretty high. The conversion rate into day number 2 is like almost only 20% because only 94 Blurple players made day 2 in Bologna. So what does it mean? Like only bad players took Blurple to DLC Bologna? No, but I think a lot of players thought like, okay, I take the best deck out there to play in a huge tournament, and it's almost always a good choice to take the best deck. But if you're playing set championships in like a smaller field, or like even though it's a bigger field for set championships like 40 to 50 players, I think you should reckon with like 30 to 40% of facing Blurple players at your set championship in your local game store. So should you pick up Blurple for your set championships? I think if you own 4 Dumbos and if you know the deck, the play lines, and if you're comfortable playing like couple mirror throughout the day, I think Blurple is still a good pick for your set championships. Even though other decks tagged heavily for beating Blurple consistently all day long, and even though only one made top 8, Blurple took the win at the end of DLC Bologna and showed why it's the deck to beat in fabled meta. But let's have a look at the winners list in detail. I think overall this is like standard for Blurple list. The core of the deck is like 50 cards. The other 10 cards are like not flex spots, but like they vary from build to build. For example, we see 6 1-drops here, we see Basil and Rafiki as 3-offs. Sometimes we also see Royal Guard or 4 Basil, so this depends on the preference of the player. But the rest, we have 4 Tipos, 4 Dumbos, 4 Genies, 4 Yagos, 4 5-cost Bells, 4 5-cost Elsas, and of course 4 Hades. And some cards vary from build to build in terms of numbers. In the final build or in the winner's build, we see only 2 copies of Madam Mim Elephant. We've also seen some Blurple list with 4 Madam Mim Elephants here. We have 2 TikToks, which is an huge evasive character, synergizing well with Dumbo, and of course, going into the evasive war, TikTok is a huge body. Not many decks can handle, and going into steel decks, TikTok is almost always a body not easy to remove. The winner also included 2 copies of the new super rare Ursula. You can, when you play the character, you can exert an opposing character and play a song with the cost of the character or less for free. So if you like exert a genie, you can play Into the Unknown for free. And if you happen to exert one 8-cost character, you can play the 1 copy of Dig a Little Deeper for free, for example, and look at the top 7 cards of your deck and put 2 into your hand. So having multiple options of exerting opposing characters is a huge thing in the current meta, because usually the boards just stare at each other, characters don't quest, don't challenge, don't do much. So having multiple options besides 5-cost Elsa is a good thing to have in this meta game. And he also included 1 copy of Magical Maneuver. You can like exert 1 character and then send 1 character back to hand. For some more removal, as I said, for Hades, we have 1 copy of Big Elsa. You can shift her on the small Elsa, but also you ramp so many times in Blurple with Sail the Azure Sea, with Tipu, and he also played 1 copy of 1 jump ahead. So playing the Elsa for the 8-cost isn't a big deal. For card draw, we have 2 copies of Finders Keepers. We have Hypnotic Strength, boosting up your characters and drawing your card, and 1 copy of Second Star to the Right, which was backbreaking and probably game winning in the last game of the best of 5 final, because like the purple steel player made kind of a mistake not taking out the bell in the turn after. The purple player could sing second star to the right, drawing 5 cards and gaining a huge tempo swing in terms of card advantage. Overall, I really like this Blurple list, even though I didn't pick up Blurple all set long because of the missing Dumbos and not willing to buy into a playset of Dumbos. I think you can, like I said in the beginning, 50 cards are the core and you can vary with the numbers of other cards. Overall, I think this Blurple build is very solid, but Blurple isn't an easy deck to pick up, as we saw in the numbers on converting into day number 2. Many players pick up this deck like it's the best deck, but they are not familiar with the playlines. So going into set championships, if you are familiar with Blurple, if you know the playlines, as I said before, take it, play it, and other than that, just take the deck you're most comfortable with. I always say it, like, take the deck you are happy to play, you're comfortable with, your comfort pick for set championships, so you know what to do when you're on the play, when you're on the draw, when you're in a bad spot. You always find a way out with a deck you know by heart and can play like blind almost. So Blurple is a good pick for set championships, but remember, you will face a lot of mirror games. They will go on for a long time and they're draining on your mental energy. And if you play a big set championship, Blurple can be like hard play all day long. So if you want to play Blurple, pick up this list. I will link it in the video description below, and yeah, you can see for yourself if Blurple is the deck you want to play, you want to bring for set championships. And we jump to the second place deck, Purple Steel. So this list took second place at DLC Bologna, and I was kind of surprised that Purple Steel made the finals and 3 Purple Steel decks were among the top 8 players. But on the other hand, I wasn't surprised, but I was convinced that Purple Steel is a good deck in this format and a good choice for a big tournament this set. And 276 players proved that Purple Steel is a good pick for a DLC. The conversion rate for day 2 is like, yeah, almost 20%, 25%, because 41 players made day 2 with Purple Steel, and like I said, 3 players also made top 8 with Purple Steel build. But let's talk about the final game a little bit, because I watched it and it was like kind of heartbreaking for me to see a Purple Steel player choking like almost inches away from winning a DLC, because he missed Dumbo Trigger twice in a turn with Happy and Shofar, could have drawn 2 cards and gained 2 lore, and not taking out Bell in 1 turn, the pre-damaged Bell with the White Rose, leaving 2 5-cost singers on board of the purple player, leading to singing second star to right, drawing 5 cards. What like a game breaking mistake by the Purple Steel player. But other than that, he was playing so good throughout the finals. Winning on the draw in game 3 was really nice to see, and doing Purple Steel things on the play in game number 2 and game number 5 was also nice to see. He was like, okay, I go wide, I just quest out, you can't handle all my characters on board. And it worked in game number 2, and yeah, like I said, he made some mistakes in the final game, but still, huge congratulations to second place Purple Steel. Let's have a look at the list real quick. It's a Dumbo build, of course, 4 copies of Dumbo, a lot of evasive characters like Happy, the Jafar, the 2-drop Smee. We have Genie Dragon, of course. We have the 4-cost Genie drawing a card. We have 5-cost Elsa. And the rest is pretty standard. Purple Steel, we see the Wanderers with Hook and Diablo, Calhoun, Doc for Kadra. We only see 3 copies of Doc, and I think it's a mistake to only play 3 Docs, because he was desperately looking for a Doc in the final turns of the last game of the final, because yeah, and he missed it. He didn't see a Doc all game long. And maybe that was also backbreaking, because like, okay, if you run only 3 copies of a card, the chance of seeing it through the game is lower, of course, if you play 4 copies, and maybe he would have drawn into a dog later in the game, which could have won him the game. But yeah, let's go over some other cards. He ran, of course, 4 copies of Giant Cobras and 2 copies of White Rose for some reach against control decks. He runs 3 copies of Pete Referee to like block actions and songs from the opponent. And for some removal, he has 2 copies of Fighter Cannons and of course 4 copies of the strongest removal song in the game right now, Strength of a Raging Fire. And the rest, yeah, like I said, pretty standard purple steel, some flag sports here and there with Madame Mim Skater, of course, boosting up challenges. And the 3-drop Jafar giving challenger +2 is also a flag sport. For more card draw, he runs also 4 copies of Isma, which is a good choice, running Dumbo and Isma in a purple steel build. And 2 copies of Bell, which came in clutch in some moments of the final as well. Other than that, I really like the purple steel build, even though I don't own Dumbos. I think this is the way to build a Dumbo deck in purple steel right now, going heavy on evasive characters. And yeah, I'm really happy for purple steel making 2nd place at such a big tournament, because it's my favorite deck and I will probably bring it to my set championships I'm attending. And you're asking yourself your question, like, should you bring purple steel to your set championships? And I think if you, like I always say, if you're comfortable with the deck, if you're comfortable with the play lines, bring purple steel. It's a different play style than Blurple. You should always play like the patience game, like go white, establish a 3-cost singer for Strength of Raging Fire, and of course play around with Dumbo and the synergies with the evasive characters. I think purple steel is a great choice for a unknown field of decks into set championships for you. I will link the 2nd place list in the video description below as well. And yeah, we have to look at another purple steel list, because this is a fellow Austrian player. Let's check this list out. This purple steel list was played by Jonas and he took top 8 at DLC Bologna. I had the honor of playing him in July at my last set championships at a local game store here in Austria. I only lost the final against him, and now I'm pretty okay with like losing to a top 8 player in the final of a set championship. Let's have a look at his purple steel list. And if you follow my videos, I've covered some of his deck lists already in my set championships videos, and he usually plays purple steel. Looking at his list, he's also playing a Dumbo list with lots of evasive characters like Dumbo, Jafar, Genie Dragon, and of course 5-cost Elsa and the 4-cost Genie drawing cards. Some other choices he made for cards: he's playing a one-off of Madame Mim Skater, he's playing 1 White Rose, and for more card draw, he's playing 2 copies of Dolores, drawing a card when your opponent has an exerted card on board, and he also plays 2 copies of Madame Mim Elephant to bounce like dogs or cards he just needs back in his hands. Like bouncing a White Rose can be game winning sometimes, or bouncing a card which would have been taken out anyway by your opponent to gain some ink or to play it again. Maybe draw 2 cards of dog again is a viable play. Other than that, the list looks pretty similar to the list I've shown you just before. From 2nd place, for removal, he also runs 2 copies of Fighter Cannons, 4 copies of Strength of a Raging Fire. He also runs Isma as a 2-of, Bell as a 2-of, and the rest is pretty much the same. I really like Johnny's approach to purple steel. In the summer, when I played him at the local games at the set championships, he ran a lot of one-offs, played like a Haufen deck, but this is more consistent. He took a very consistent list to DLC Bologna, and I'm really proud of an Austrian player making top 8 at such a big tournament with my favorite deck. I will also link his deck list in the video description below, and I'm looking forward to play against him in another set championships, maybe this set or another. Big shout out to Johnny or Jonas, a fellow Austrian player. Great job of making top 8 at DLC Bologna and getting a golden Mickey, and of course qualifying for the European Championships next year. And we go on to the next deck I recommend for set championships. Even though it's not my type of deck I like to play, Seadogs is a great pick into a big field of Blurple decks, and the players proved it. 117 Lemon Lime Dog players appeared at DLC Bologna, and 33 converted into day 2, which is the highest conversion rate among all color combinations in the whole DLC Bologna. Looking at this list, and there are several ways to play this deck. This is a top 8 list from a player, and he tried to go the Aurora Tiana way with like using Aurora to play out Tiana at 2 cost in turn 2, and then use Tiana's ability to not having his characters being challenged. And of course he's playing a lot of 1-drop characters like Bobby, Daisy, the 1-drop Dual Link Lady, the 1-drop Lady, and 2 copies of Merryweather, and he also plays 2 copies of Pluto. You can exert him and also play a character for 1 ink less. Using Pluto and Aurora together, you can play like Aurora for 1 ink, use the rest of the ink for some other characters, and just go wide, flood the board. And when you have enough ink, your game plan is to chain 1 tramp into another and then have enough singing power on board to sing Under the Sea and remove the board from your opponent. It's a good pick into Blurple because Blurple has issues with decks going wide, playing multiple characters in a turn, and having a bodyguard with Jim Deere in the deck as well can protect your board for at least 1 more turn, so you can quest to 20 with ease. Also, we see in the list Gogo Tomago, which can be really good for closing out a game out of nowhere. Tramp can boost one of your characters, you leave damage on an opposing characters, and then just finish the game with Gogo Tomago. We also see 3 copies of the Dual Ink Shift Lady, getting 2 characters with cost 2 or less from your discard back to your hand, and 3 copies of Improvise, which is a good tool to deal with illusion characters like Yago, the Giant Cobra, or the 1-drop Imperial Guard. So I think this Lemon Lime Seadog list is just one way to build this deck. I think like in almost all decks, this deck has like 50 cards core, but you can vary the other cards or vary in number of the cards. Some lists run more 1-drop characters, they skip the Bodyguard, they skip the Pluto and the Aurora Tiana package and focus more on 1-drop characters like Nala, Little John and stuff like that. But other than that, I think this is a very solid Lemon Lime Seadog list. I will also link this list in the video description below from the top 8 DLC Bologna. And you're asking yourself, is this list good into set championships? And I say yes. This is probably one of the best picks you can do into set championships right now, because people playing a lot of Blurple, and this deck is really strong into Blurple. If you happen to face a lot of steel decks, I think Lemon Lime Seadogs could get into some troubles. But if you face a lot of green-blue decks, Blurple decks, this deck can be really good for set championships. If you are a player patient enough to not quest aggressively and just play the patience game until you can chain 1 tramp into another, draw off tramp, and establish enough singers for Under the Sea, this deck is for you. As I said, I will link it in the video description below. And we jump to the next deck I recommend for set championships in Fabled. Like 1 or 2 weeks ago, Amber Steel Aggro was all over the place, winning the first CCQ worldwide, and I think it didn't lost any of its strength going into an unknown field or a big field of competitive play. Looking at this top 8 list, I think this is pretty standard. Some cards are like flag spots, but I think this is the way how to build Amber Steel aggro in Fabled meta going into set championships or bigger tournaments. As 1-drop characters, we have Aurora synergizing well with the Princess Tiana, cheating her out in turn 2 for less ink. Of course, we have Daisy, we have Mulan filtering through your hand cards, getting rid of those cards you don't need. We have the Rhino Shift package, and we have lots of 2-drop characters here. We have Calhoun, we have Doc, we have Chimdir as a bodyguard. Of course, we have 4 copies of Nala, which is so good, questing for 3 if she's undamaged. We have Penny giving resist, and as a 2-drop singer, singing for 4, we have 3 copies of Troubadour. He can sing World's Greatest Criminal Mind, he can sing Strength of a Raging Fire, and he's just so good and hard to remove with his resist 1. On the 3-drop slot, we have the 3-drop Lady, 4 copies of her. You can play a character which costs 2 or less for free when you play Lady, so you can go wide pretty early. And of course, we run 4 copies of the Steel Pete Referee, blocking actions from your opponent because this deck doesn't like Under the Sea. And if you happen to play against Seadogs or a blue-green deck, Pete is the way to go to block Under the Sea and quest out the game. And as I mentioned before, we have 4 copies of the Amber Tiana. When she's exerted, your opponent has to pay 3 ink. Other than that, he loses 3 ink when challenging your characters. For removal, we have 3 copies of Fire the Cannons and 4 copies of Strength of a Raging Fire, which is pretty standard. And we see 2 copies of World's Greatest Criminal Mind, which is a flag spot, but very good into the big decks like Green Blue, or if you face a Maui Shark, but this is rather rare these days. But going into Blurple decks also, World's Greatest Criminal Mind can take out a Monstro, for example, because Monstro is a card you have problems with because he can challenge into multiple characters from you when he's dropped down. Yeah, overall, I think Amber Steel is still in a good spot in the current meta and a good pick for set championships going into your local game store. I think it's an easy deck to pick up. There are not many mistakes you can make. You just drop 1 character each turn or maybe 2 going wide and be patient, quest out, and just win the game. On the draw, if you find the optimal line, the perfect line, this deck is almost unbeatable. And going into a lot of Blurples, and you can reckon with lots of Blurples at your local game store, at your set championship. This deck is a good pick because Blurple has issues with decks going wide. And you also have some removal options with Fighter Cannons to get rid of bounce targets, or you can sing Strength the Raging Fire onto opposing Dumbos and Genies and get rid of them and just go wide each turn, play character after characters. For card draw, we have 4 copies of Dark. That's it, but I think that's enough because you rather play your hand empty and just dump your hand and flood the board with your small characters. Going into set championships, pick up Amber Steel if you like going fast, going aggro. I will link this top 8 list from DLC Bologna in the video description below, and we're gonna look at 2 more decks which made a good impression at DLC Bologna. Green Steel is a rather wild pick for a DLC or at this time, but recently this deck came up, a tempo list with the Emerald Chromicon. 46 players took Green Steel to DLC Bologna and 6 players made day 2, and this list you see right now on your screen made top 4 into a 2000 player field. This deck can be so annoying to play against just because of 1 card, Emerald Chromicon. Whenever one of your characters gets banished in your opponent's turn, you can bounce a character back to a hand. So your opponent is forced to make weird playlines and overthink his turns. We play lots of 1 and 2 drop characters, and the deck tops out at 4 ink with Heathcliff, 2 copies of him. 2 Lorcana has Ward also, and we play lots of 1 drops with Bobby Simuruski filtering through hand cards, Captain Hook for some challenge power, Cursed Merfolk for some questing power, questing for 2, and 2 copies of Fred, which is an interesting choice, and I really like him because people tend to ignore Fred because he's only questing for 1, but when he gets challenged and then usually banished because he's only 1 willpower, you gain 2 lore. And yeah, we also have Mulan filtering through your hand cards. On the 2-drop slot we have of course Calhoun and Dog as uninkable cards, and we've seen on stream that the player playing Green Steel bounced his own dogs with Emerald Chromicon, playing him inconsistently again and again, drawing 2 cards of him, which is a very good play. To close out the game, Gogo Tomago is in the deck 4 times, and to rip songs off your opponent's hands like Under the Sea, which this deck is like allergic to, with lots of like 2 strength and 1 strength characters. You can rip Under the Sea off your opponent's hands. For more card draw, we see 1 copy of the 3-cost Clarabelle, and we have 4 copies of Louis in the deck. He comes in to play Exerted and giving one of the opposing characters Reckless, so he has to challenge into Louis, which is pretty strong to take out a big lore quester or maybe an opposing Tiana going into Amber Steel aggro. Of course, we have Pete to referee to block opposing actions, and more ward characters with Prince Philip, 4 copies of the 2 Lorcana having ward as well, so he can be targeted by cards like Hades, Strength of Raging Fire, or stuff like that. For removal, we also run 3 copies of Fire the Cannons, and of course 4 copies of Strength of Raging Fire, as always in every steel deck. I think overall this deck is really strong and can take your opponent by surprise if you manage to establish 1 or even 2 Emerald Chromicons on board. I think 4 copies of Emerald Chromicon might be a little bit too optimistic. I think 3 is fine too, but it worked for this player, making top 4 at DLC Bologna. So is Emerald Steel a deck to pick up for your set championships? If you like familiar with playing steel decks, I think this deck is easy to pick up, and you can take your opponent by surprise and be really annoying to play against him with Louis, with Emerald Chromicon, and you have multiple characters also to challenge into the opposing characters and leave damage for Gogo Tomago to close out game. I will link the top 4 green steel list from Bologna in the video description below, and if you like taking green steel to your set championships, I think this is a good pick right now, because not many players play this deck and not many players know how to play against this deck. And since there's not much item hate right now other than the 1-drop Clarabelle, which can take out an item, I think Emerald Chromicon is the way to go with green steel. And I really like the approach here. And if you're familiar with green steel, this deck could be a good choice for your set championships to take home the win. And we have a look at the last deck for today, going into the meta after DLC Bologna and your set championships. Green Blue was highly discussed as the Blurple killer itself, and yeah, like 288 players showed up at DLC Bologna with Emerald Sapphire, which is the 3rd most played deck overall, and 46 players made day 2, but I think only 1 or 2 made top cut. And this list you see on screen right now is a list from another fellow Austrian player, Mysti, as we call him in our local game store. A big shout out to him and huge congrats on making top 16 with this green blue list at DLC Bologna and qualifying for the European Championships next year. Looking at his build, he decided to go for the Baymax build with more one-drop characters. He included 4 copies of Bobby Simuruski to filter through your hand cards and have a potential shift target for Baymax later to sing an early Under the Sea to have an edge against all the aggro decks you probably facing all day long at such a big tournament. For more ramp, he plays 2 copies of Pleakley. You can ink a character of yours and put it into the inkwell when you play Pleakley, and he runs 3 copies of the Sapphire Kida. You can exert her, look at the top 2 cards from your deck, put one into your inkwell, exert it, and the other one back on top of your deck to know what you draw into the next turn. Other than that, I think this green-blue deck is what we've been seeing all season long for Emerald Sapphire decks. We have John Silver, we have the 7-drop Basil, we have of course the Clarabelle shift package with the 1-drop Clarabelle, the 3-drop Clarabelle, and the big one. Only 3 copies of Hades here, but we see 1 copy of Mother Knows Best, which is a very good split here to have several options, and a very spicy pick, 1 copy of the 8-cost Inkable Radigan. He has a huge body with 6 strength, 7 willpower, he has ward, and he quests for 4 lore. If you ink in a turn, he stays on board. If you don't ink, you have to banish him at the end of your turn. But with this deck, you have so many options to ink with Kida on board. You can ink twice each turn. So if you manage to keep Radigan alive for at least 1 turn, he quests for 4, and then he's also very hard to take out. For some other actions, we run of course 4 copies of Sail the Azeroth Sea, 4 copies of Visions of the Future to go through your deck and put the cards in hand you really need. And we have 1 copy of Bend to Your Will, which is a good tool in the mirror game and also against Blurple, drawing off so many cards with second star to the right. And the Dumbo effect, Bend to My Will, is a good choice. To have synergies with Clarabelle, of course, 4 copies of You're Welcome, and then we have the Under the Sea and Triple H combo, 3 copies of Head Outside, 3 copies of Under the Sea, and he added 2 copies of Stop Chaos Rides in its tracks. You can send 2 characters with 3 strength or less back to its owner's hand. So you can choose one of your characters, maybe a Hades to play him again, or you can send 2 characters back to your opponent's hands, which is a very good tool against aggro decks for preventing them to quest. Overall, I really like Mysti's green-blue list here. He used to play blue steel. Sorry, he used to play blue steel like from the day I know him, and picked up green-blue I think with this set, and it was a good choice going into DLC Bologna. Is it an easy deck to pick up? No. I think there are several ways to build the deck. Overall, Baymax build probably is the superior one to facing lots of aggro decks right now. And if you want to pick up green-blue for your set championship, you can watch one of my gameplay videos, and I think if you manage to learn the playlines and to go through the options this deck offers, it can win you a set championship if you pick it up. Again, huge shout out to Mysti making top 16 at DLC Bologna. I'm really happy for him to making such a good result with this deck. I will link it of course in the video description below, and I hope you liked my choices for decks going into set championships. I think these top 5 decks are a good pick for going into the set champs in Fabled meta. And yeah, that's it for today. If you like this video, leave a like, leave a comment, check out the decks I linked in the video description. If you're new to my channel, I'm always happy about new viewers, so hit subscribe and join my channel. Thanks for watching, see you next time, Flocky.